Good morning. The Pardon Board is called to order. Today is May the 8th, 2023. The time is 8:30 a.m. I would like staff to please call the roll.
Ms. Renata,
Present.
Mr. Marabella. Absent. Mr. Pete,
Present.
Ms. Jackson,
Here.
Mr. Roche.
Here.
All right, we have 4 members of the Pardon Board here this morning, so we do have a quorum. And let me just say that any favorable action will require you to vote this morning. Our first item on the agenda is review and approval of the minutes from our April 24th meeting. Those minutes are included in your packet. Are there any corrections?
Madam Chairman, I have read the minutes from the meeting of April 24th, 2023. All information contained in those minutes are correct. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the minutes as printed.
We have a motion to accept the minutes as printed. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion by Mr. Roach, second by Mrs. Jackson to approve the minutes. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. So we'll move right into consideration of applications for clemency. Let me just say that the Pardon Board is seated at DOC headquarters this morning. And I would like for our staff here to introduce themselves for the record, please.
Whitney Trostclair, Sherelle,
Carla Williams.
Francis Avenue.
Great, thank you. Our first remote location this morning is at Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women, and with the staff at LCIW, please introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning, Kristen Thomas, Warden.
Tara P, ARDC Manager. Acting Gaddy, ARDC Supervisor.
All right, thank you. And our first case is Ms. Crain. Ms. Crain, would you introduce yourself? Tell us your name and DOC name.
Yes, ma'am. Shanda Crain, 376963.
All right, good morning. And you have counsel. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, Ms. Renat. So Robert Lancaster with the LSU Parole and Reentry Clinic here today representing Ms. Crain. With me, I have 2 law students on this case, Diamond McCrae and Gabrielle Daigle. They're both second-year law students. They're not certified under Louisiana Supreme Court Rule 20, but they've been working with Ms. Crain in preparation for the hearing today. They worked to prepare the packet that was submitted to the board in advance of the hearing today. Since I have 2 students, if the board permits, Ms. Daigle could give a very brief opening statement, and Ms. McCrae could give a closing statement after Ms. Crain gives her final remarks.
All right, well, that's how we'll do it. Thank you so much. Let me acknowledge first the folks who are have joined us today. We have the Parole Project here on Zoom. Here with us in Baton Rouge, we have Christy Sheremy, Megan Crain. Well, she's on Zoom. Brittany Spears in person here with us. Martin Tankle,
Yes, ma'am.
Derek Howard, Harry Andrews, Hartley Howard, Jack Resnich, Anita Mosley, Joe Stewart, Maya Hambrick, Cynthia DeQueer, Demetrici, or did I say that? Shalonda Hines, and I have twice Shalonda Hines. Is she here with us or on Zoom?
She didn't make the link.
Okay, she's here. And I see some folks there at LCIW. I don't have a list. Would someone introduce the folks who are at LCIW in support?
Do you want to introduce them?
I can.
Okay.
I can. Ms. Renata, I have Gail Willers, Dee Dee Boyd, Patty Wainwright, Laura Davis, and Vanessa Guidreau.
All right, well, thank you. And we'll have 3 folks that will speak on your behalf. I have on my list, so tell me if this is okay with you. Christy Sheremy, Megan Crain, and Martin Tankle will speak on your behalf.
I thought Brittany was speaking, my daughter Brittany.
Okay.
Instead of Martin Tanker.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, so Ms. Crain, let me introduce the board to you. My name is Cheryl Renatza. You heard the roll call, but I'll reintroduce my colleagues. Seated to my far left is Mrs. Bonnie Jackson. To my immediate left is Mr. Alvin Roche, and to my right is Mr. Pete Freeman. I'll read some information into the record. After you verify that information, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Jackson. Your case has been assigned to her. She'll take the lead on the interview. After we hear from Ms. Daigle, we'll have some opening remarks before we start the interview process. We'll hear from the warden and those who've indicated, or you've indicated you'd like to speak on your behalf. You'll be allowed to make a statement before we turn it over to Ms. McRae for the closing out for us, okay?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So Ms. Crain, you're here this morning seeking a commutation of your sentence. You were sentenced in March 1997 in Washington Parish. For 2 counts of first-degree murder, you received a life sentence. Is that information correct, Ms. Crain?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Ms. Daigle, we'd like to hear your opening statement, please.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the board. Ms. Crain comes before you today as a woman who made it her goal to achieve total rehabilitation. She has taken advantage of every opportunity she was presented to become a better mother, a better friend, a better sister, and a better daughter. She has participated and facilitated over 40 programs offered at LCIW. She rebuilt LCIW's Toastmasters program from the ground up to the thriving organization it is today. She was the 4th incarcerated female to attain the Distinguished Toastmasters status, and she even created the Snack Shack, which is the only concession stand to serve incarcerated individuals and their families. Not only does Ms. Crain participate in programs to better herself, but she also uses her talents to help others. She has mentored hundreds of women through the court reentry program and battered women's group. And one thing is for certain when others speak about their mentor relationship with Ms. Crain, that she has made an everlasting impact on these ladies and that they will be eternally grateful for her. Furthermore, Ms. Crain has been praised as an exemplary institutional role model by past and present wardens. She's received less than 10 disciplinary write-ups over her span of 29 years of incarceration and maintained a minimum 3 trustee status since 2012. Ms. Crain is not the same person she was 29 years ago, and through today's hearing, you will see and hear how she is an example of moral rehabilitation and positive change. Thank you.
I failed to mention that we do have some folks here in opposition. We have a representative from the DA's office, Mr. Clark, who will be speaking in opposition at the appropriate time. We also have representing the victim, Ms. LaSonia Whitehead, who is also here in opposition. Mrs. Jackson.
Good morning, Ms. Crain. How are you doing today?
Hey, Ms. Jackson, a little nervous. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Ms. Crain, how old are you?
I'm 57. I'll be 58 in July.
Okay. And how much time have you actually served on this?
I'm sorry for interrupting. You weren't finished. I'm sorry.
How much time have you actually served on this charge?
I've been locked up since January the 30th, 1995. So I'm 28 years going into my 29th year.
Ms. Crain, I've reviewed your case very carefully. And what I'd like to do is just tell me or what happened to your parents? What happened to your parents?
On January the 25th, 1995, my husband and I had devised a plan to steal some money out of their home, and my parents ended up murdered. I killed my parents in the process.
Well, you're skipping over a whole lot of the process, Ms. Crain. So I want to know specifically, who shot and killed each of your parents?
I didn't shoot my parents, but I'm responsible because I left the door open and I was there and I was part of it. And I'm so,
No, I don't hear that yet. Ms. Crain, there's been a lot of discrepancies in your statements over the years. There's actually a confession. We have a police report, and there's a confession where you acknowledge shooting both of your parents. Initially, you blamed your husband for the killing. But he, although lie detector tests are admissible, he passed a lie detector test, but more importantly, his alibi was thoroughly investigated and it checked out. And when you were told by the police that your husband was not a viable suspect, you then blamed your younger brother. Isn't that correct?
yes, ma'am, I did a lot of lying back then.
Well, I understand that, but you might be doing a lot of lying today. And I will tell you, one of the things that's important to me as a board member is the honesty of the person that I am making a decision on.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Your husband was never charged with this offense, is that correct?
No, ma'am, he wasn't.
And so despite your claims that he was part of this plot for robbery, there was no evidence to substantiate that, and he was never charged with any crime. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And in fact, you were the one who threw the weapon in the oxidation pond, and that's where they recovered the weapon. Is that not correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And in fact, you have been stealing money from your parents to support a gambling habit. Is that not correct?
Yes, ma'am, that was correct, along with his drug habits.
Well,
We were
again,
both taking money.
ma'am, you keep trying to blame somebody else and bring somebody else into this. He
No,
didn't
ma'am.
kill your parents. You
No, ma'am.
shot both your parents.
Yes, ma'am, I killed my parents.
Now, you started off by saying, well, I feel responsible because I left the door open. My question to you today is, did you in fact shoot and kill both of your parents?
Yes, ma'am.
Why?
There was a lot going on with me and my husband, and I'm not blaming him. I'm just trying to give you some type of foundation to how it got to that point. I'm not trying to put the blame off on him, but he was very abusive to me and my oldest daughter, and he wanted money. I wanted money. I was trying to please him. I was trying to just make sure everybody just didn't get hurt in the whole situation. And in the process, I ended up hurting the two people who means the most to me. And I am so, so sorry.
Ms. Crain, stop it. First of all, you were the one, I think there was like $30,000 embezzled from your family. You were the one who cut the phone lines to their house so the bank couldn't call them to inform them of discrepancies in their banking account. You were the one who did that.
Yes, ma'am, I did that.
And then you went to their house. You took your daughter because she was sick, didn't go to school. You took her to your parents' house where she fell asleep. And then prior to going in the house to kill your parents, you went in the house, you brought your daughter out of the house, and then you went and you murdered both your parents. So let's not sugarcoat what happened.
No, ma'am.
Today you're blaming it on an abusive relationship, but blamed your younger brother.
I don't recall. blaming my younger brother because he was offshore.
Again, Ms. Crain, we have a complete record. I have every police report. I have every statement that you have ever made in connection with this case. And again, when confronted with the information that your husband could not have committed this crime, you then said it was your younger brother.
I don't dispute the record, no ma'am. I just don't recall that.
And my question is, why, how could you shoot and kill both of your parents?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what she said.
How could you shoot and kill both of your parents?
Saying thinking clearly is not even the better words. I was scared.
Of
My husband.
all right, we're gonna move forward, Ms. Crain. You know, I have looked at your prison history and it looks good on paper. It really does look good. You've had, your counsel said less than 10 disciplinary write-ups, but according to the record, there were actually 12 write-ups. Now, 3 of them were on the same date. No, that's not true. 3 of them were in 2007, but you've actually had 12 disciplinary write-ups, the last of which was on March 4th of 2009. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was a Rule 4, which was disobedience. Do you remember anything about that?
Yes, ma'am. I had a terry cloth robe that I wasn't supposed to have. The big laundry couldn't dry them, and we were supposed to send them home, and I hadn't sent mine home yet.
How is that disobedience? What was the basis for the disobedience?
Because we were asked to mail them home, and I hadn't mailed mine home yet.
I looked up, you have 1, 2, 5, 7, 8, 9 of your 12 write-ups have either been for disobedience, and then you have 1 for aggravated disobedience. What's going on?
2007.
9 of your write-ups have been either for disobedience, and it was 1 for an aggravated disobedience. And I'm just asking you, why were you having those kinds of issues from 98 to 2009 when you got your last write-up?
I know that one of my reports was for having on my not having on my state boots to go to the kitchen. The other one was for being loud in the game room during a card game. I had 2 kissing reports. I had for passing the newspaper in the day room. When I lived upstairs, I came downstairs and passed the newspaper, which was transacting, and for transacting some food to someone. Those are the reports that I remember. And then I had a report for having some face cream that was dismissed.
Okay, all right. Now, I see you've done a lot educationally. You're currently enrolled as a student at Tulane. You have a upholstery degree from Louisiana Technical College. You are a tutor in the core basic construction program. You've been a tutor for upholstery and a tutor for furniture restoration. What is your current job Is it the reentry program? Is that your current job?
I do two different jobs. I'm a furniture restoration instructor, an NCCER core instructor, and I am a lead vocational reentry court mentor.
So let's talk about some of the programs that you've taken that might address some issues that you have.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you taken victim awareness?
Yes, ma'am. I've taken victim.
When did you take that?
In 2012, I actually put together the program for victim awareness, and I'm currently in the new victim impact class that just recently started for the first time at LCIW. Within the past month and a half, 2 months, it just started.
Well, what program have you taken that's personally had the most impact on you as a human being?
There's several programs that have had an impact, and I've got something out of all of them, but I would have to say Toastmasters is one.
Why is that?
Ma'am,
Why is that?
Toastmasters was my saving grace, so to speak. When I entered prison, I was very ashamed and guilt-ridden, and I couldn't even look people in the eye and talk to them. And so a lady approached me and asked me to join Toastmasters, and I did. And Toastmasters helped me gain back some self-esteem and some self-worth. And I learned a lot, communication skills and leadership skills that I have used throughout my entire time here at LCIW. Thinking for a Change is another one that really, really was impactful in my life because
You learned in Thinking for Change.
ma'am,
What did you learn specifically in Thinking for Change?
I learned about thinking errors and cognitive self-change and active listening, which just kind of like impounded on what I had learned in Toastmasters, active listening. And I learned that people think differently.
Those are great, programs, but they don't address what is it in you or about you that would even allow you to kill your parent. I mean, that's something that, 99.9% of people on earth would not do, and that is murder both their parents. And I'm hearing about Toastmasters and, self-esteem and being able to express yourself. But what I'm not hearing is what was it in you? What was it in you that would allow you not just to think about killing your parents, but to actually go in and do it? I'm not hearing that you've gotten to the core reason. I don't know whether you're narcissistic. I don't know if you have some other issues, but the average person who commits a murder would not kill their parent. And I'm not anything from you that's explaining what you've learned about yourself. Because a lot of people are in domestic situations. They might kill their abuser, but that wouldn't translate into them killing their parent.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so hear from you what you have learned about yourself that you believe enabled you to commit this kind of crime.
Yes, ma'am. I was going to get into the battered women's program, and that's where I learned truly about myself. And I learned that I was an individual who needed the approval of someone else. And I just wanted to be loved. I just wanted to be loved, and I wanted to be accepted, and I wanted to be loyal, and I wanted to be all of those things that I could be. And battered women taught me that it's okay to be who I am, but I also have to stand for something. And I couldn't stand for anything. I was a very weak individual. And I just let anyone tell me what to do.
Your husband told you to kill your parents?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to the police report, just give me a moment. Your husband was not on the scene when your parents were killed, were they not? Your husband was not on the scene when your parents were killed, is that correct?
He was, but the police report says he wasn't. I covered for him, Miss Jackson. I took the blame because I felt totally responsible. It was my fault.
Well, let me read some of the details that you gave the police, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
I hate to have to do this, but because of your lack of candor, I feel compelled to do that. On the morning of Wednesday, January 25th, 1995, at approximately 7 o'clock, Ms. Crain advised that she drove up to the residence of her mother and father, accompanied by her daughter, Brittany. Arrived at the residence, was met at the door by her father, who let Ms. Crain and her daughter into the home through the back door. She tells where the back door. This was the second door from the west wall of the residence. After entering the residence, Ms. Crain left her daughter with her father and proceeded to the dairy barn to make preparations for that morning's milking. She stated that she won't get into the milking because that's not, but she returned to her parents' home, entered through the same door she had entered previously, went to her father's bedroom and awakened her daughter without disturbing her father, who had apparently gone back to bed. She took her daughter to the car, placed the child inside the vehicle, leaving the child there. She returned inside the residence, entered her father's room, picked up his weapon, which he kept beside his bed, fired one shot in the direction of her father. She stated that shot apparently missed her father because he was awakened by the first shot and started to rise from his prone position. At that point, she looked directly, Mr. Crain looked directly at me, meaning the officer. Mr. Harrell, my daddy saw me. Ms. Crain stated that she fired the weapon again, but could not advise how many times she shot. She stated that she then went to her mother's room, which is located a few feet away across the hall. Upon entering her mother's room, Ms. Crain stated, "I wanted to shoot Mama in the leg, so I aimed low." I asked Ms. Crain how many times she fired the weapon at her mother, and she replied, "I don't know. I heard Mama scream and I run out of the house." I asked Ms. Crain if she knew she had hit her mama, and she replied, "No." I asked Ms. Crain to try to explain to me why she felt she needed to shoot her mother and father. And then she replied, "I thought that if I could get rid of Mama and Daddy, that all of my problems would be solved." I asked Ms. Crain to explain which of her problems, and she stated, "My husband was very jealous of my parents, and I thought if they were out of the way, then Brent would love her." I asked Ms. Crain to continue with her statement, and she complied. She stated that after she left the residence, she took the child to Kim's house, her sister-in-law, and returned to the barn to finish milking. I asked her where the weapon was, and she responded, in my coveralls. I asked her where the weapon was at that time. She said in my coverall. I asked her to tell me about the weapon. She replied, I threw it in the pond. I asked her which pond, and she said the one by the barn, the oxidation pond. Got emotional, and he left the room and he settled down, and that was kind of the extent of the interview. That's what you told the police. Ultimately.
Yes, ma'am.
Your husband was there. You didn't tell him, you told them that you felt like your parents were a problem and you needed to eliminate to solve your own problem. Those were your words.
Yes, ma'am.
And so my question is, you keep wanting to blame domestic violence. There's no evidence that there's been any domestic violence. So I'm trying to, what is it?
I'm not blaming domestic violence because I made my own choices, but it was because of the domestic violence of the choices that I made, and I was scared of my husband.
Okay, that's
and I was scared for my daughter.
Ms. Crain, that's fine. We'll leave it there. Well, what can you tell us about Ms. Crain?
Good morning. I think Ms. Daigle, her counsel, has mentioned most of her notable accomplishments, and you had also mentioned with her participation in Tulane, and she does tutor and mentor a lot of the ladies here, which is quite a tremendous help to us. We did discuss some of her write-ups, and we did discuss most of the majority are low court write-ups, some more minor infractions, and she has not had a write-up since 2009. She does run our only snack shack, which is our concession stand. And if she does have favorable outcome today, I know Mr. Myers will probably speak, or Ms. Sherman will probably speak on that behalf, but her intention is to transition with the parole project, which we highly respect around here.
Is this Renata?
Mr. Roche?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning, Ms. Crain. How are you?
I'm okay, Mr. Roche. How are you?
Good, thank you for asking. Ms. Crain, at what point you killed your parents in 1995? At what point did you start having financial problems?
Financial problems I had for many years, whenever prior to the murder of my parents, I had for many years. Once when my husband, I keep saying my husband and I because we were together and we had money problems.
Okay.
And that was approximately 8 years prior.
Okay, so what did you do for a living? Did you have a job?
I worked odd jobs, yes, sir. I worked for his brother. I worked for an attorney, a civil attorney, Mr. Ronnie Glenn Penton. And I also worked for my parents as well. I did things for them, but most of the time I just stayed home with the children.
Okay. What did your husband do?
He drove a truck for a florist company.
Listen, looking at your police report, starting in 1991, you had theft by checks, worthless checks at 91, issuing worthless checks again in 1991, 1992, issuing worthless checks. It goes on and on. Aggravated assault. What was that about in 1994?
Aggravated assault.
Yeah, 2 counts of aggravated assault. And you pled guilty.
I'm not-
1994.
I'm not quite sure about,
Mr. O'Shea, if I could, we had questions about that. And of course, as the board is aware, we don't get a copy of the pre-clemency report, but looking through her records, we weren't able to verify that. I understand the records that the institution has as well don't indicate that prior charge. So I don't know if that's a mistake in the pre-clemency report.
It said that she pled guilty to one count and was fined $100 on 5 days in the parish jail. So it was a conviction. Okay. Now,
Again, we don't have a copy of the pre-clemency report. So if that's a mistake in the pre-clemency report, we can't
right,
challenge.
okay. But what I'm saying is, parish part, you had financial problems for many years before you killed your parents.
yes,
Is
sir,
that-
yes, sir, we did.
Basically, you had embezzled over $30,000 from your parents, and you cut the telephone lines so they couldn't be notified that their checking account had been compromised. Could this been a motive for killing your parents?
No, sir, my parents would give me anything. They just wouldn't give me any money to give my husband.
So why would you embezzle $30,000 from their checking account if your parents would give you anything?
I don't recall it being that much, sir. I did write some checks on their account because I paid the bills for them. And I
Okay.
did,
Okay, thank you, Ms. Crain. Thank you, Ms. Crain. Ms. Crain, today is a day that I would expect you to be honest about everything. Because the first step in rehabilitation is to take full responsibility for what you have done. And as late as in a statement to parole and probation in 2022, just last year, you stated, "I did not kill my parents."
yes, sir.
Most important step, as far as I'm concerned, in your rehabilitation is that you accept responsibility for your actions and show that you have been rehabilitated and that you will not act such a manner ever again.
Yes, sir, I understand.
Not done that in your statements, and you have not done that today, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ruscio. Ms. Crain, you've done some wonderful programs in prison. Your accomplishments are many and great. What have you done specifically to address your gambling addiction?
They don't actually have a program here, but I entered the substance abuse, the living in balance, because it is about addiction. And addiction has the same elements in any form. And so I attended that particular class, and I attend an RDAP, which is a residential drug abuse program that we have in-house with the reentry court mentors weekly. So that I can just stay abreast on those things.
Did you also have a drug drug problem?
No, ma'am, I didn't have a drug problem.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't have any other questions. We'll hear from the folks who are here in support. Could we hear from the parole project? Christy.
Good morning, Christy Sherry with Louisiana Parole Project. Parole Project is committed. If in fact Ms. Crain is granted here today, things still in favor, we're committed to programming, accepting her in our housing for transitional housing. We don't want to put a definite answer on how long Ms. Crain will be able to stay. It's normally a case by case basis. But we have a social worker on staff, and she will be doing assessments on Ms. Shanda Crain in the event that she comes through our program, and help her with any counseling, connect her with any resources that she would need in connection with counseling. In addition to that, we will also be committed to helping her with any technology concerns, helping her with banking, financial skills, employment skills, preparing her. Our programming is very intensive immediately when they come home, so they're very, very busy. Our clients are very, very busy with the intensive programming, and it can last up to the first few weeks. And then after that, we would be committed to giving her any extended services that she needs. Outside of what the Louisiana Parole Project has on her, I have known Shanda for many years. And she is one of the few women that I know that wholeheartedly commits themselves to instilling qualities in us, the younger generation. I was always prone to gravitating to the older generation because I seen something in them that I want. And I always make a joke of it, if I may have a moment, because I worked in a snack shack with Shanda, and I was her head cook. And I never understood why, because I always say, oh, that was the hardest supervisor I ever had. And I never really had any outside of the prison. But she gave me so much while I was there. She saw something in me that I couldn't even see in myself. She poured herself into people, and I've witnessed that for many, many years. I don't ever want to discredit anything that brought her to prison, because I understand that we all should be held accountable. But the woman that she is today, I can attest to. And that woman is a very selfless woman. That woman has given so much to not only myself, but to many. I have women who couldn't come in today because we were overcrowded, and we have women at the Jetson Detention Center, and those women she gave life to. She gave direction, and I just don't want that not to be seen, because she is a wonderful person despite her actions. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Megan Crain.
She was down, so.
Yeah, is she still there?
Yeah.
She's
Hey,
all right,
I
come on,
went nowhere.
go ahead. Can you just find a place to be stationary?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry. Okay.
And go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us your relationship to Ms. Crain, and then tell us what you'd like us to know.
Hi, I'm Megan Crain. I am Shanda's youngest daughter. And what I would like for y'all to know is that I witnessed the abuse that took place before all this happened. I watched my daddy drown my mama. I watched my mama be forced to scrub the floor with a toothbrush. I have studied this case since I was a kid. And I can also tell you too, that the police, it's unfortunate that the people we look up to are supposed to protect and serve us. There are dirty ones, and that's just a fact, because I personally was forced to plead guilty to a charge that I was innocent from, and I can prove that. But I also can tell you this. I don't care. Paper can say anything. My mother is innocent, because my mother was forced, and from mental abuse perspective, she was scared to death of my daddy. I watched him take her head and put her in water, and she would beg and pick her head back up. My mama was scared of my daddy. My mama ain't a murderer. My mama is a survivor. My mama is a woman of God, and she's the best mother that I could ever have. And I'm proud of my mama. And I don't care how it all looks, because guess what? My mama, it may all look like my mama was part of it, but all it was, my mama was seeking love. And she allowed the devil to make her do things. And then it put her in a bad spot, and where fear took over, and it made her not only lose her husband, she lost her mama and daddy, she lost her life and her children. And my mama walked up in there, and she was the first time ever in jail, and she was told she would never get out. And when I tell you my mama's done more for me in them walls than anybody, you better believe everything I'm telling you. And when I tell you them police that are involved in all that, they are dirty, because they've reached out to me in the process. Mike Barnado, he reached out to me recently. And when I got to questioning him, guess what? That man never told me nothing. I've studied this case. I went up there. They've got files that are missing. And I understand you're about to stop me. Hey,
Ma'am, you need to wrap it up for us, please.
I understand you about to stop me, because I wanted to stop you when you was questioning my mama. But let me
All
tell
right.
you, she is a victim.
Thank you, ma'am.
She is a victim of criminal injustice. I have not lived my life since 95, and I want to.
All right. Brittany, could we hear from you? Go ahead. Introduce yourself first.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. My name is Brittany Spears, and I am Shanda's oldest daughter and Lenderson Bobby's oldest granddaughter. I would like to begin by saying thank you to everyone who has allowed me the opportunity to speak today. It has been a long 28-year journey that has led us here to this very moment, and I'm so thankful we are finally here. For those of you who are unfamiliar with my story, I would like to take a moment to briefly share the series of events from my childhood that shaped my future. As an 8-year-old little girl on what was a very average day, I lost not only my grandparents and my mother, but I also lost the innocence of my childhood. You see, when my mother was taken from me, I was placed in the custody of Brent, my stepfather. From that day forward, for nearly 5 years, I was brutally abused. As I was attempting to manage the raw emotions of the daily abuse, yet another hurdle that I would have to overcome was placed in my path. What seemed like endless questioning about my mother's case. During this questioning, the district attorney had photos of my grandparents' slain body in plain sight for my 8-year-old mind to see and attempt to process. During this time, I wasn't allowed to see my mother, and I had no support or therapy to help me realize the gravity of the situation at hand. I was so young, so persuaded, and so impressionable at only 8 years old. The system did fail me. Once I was older and able to visit my mom, we have grown a beautiful and strong relationship. My mom has inspired me to rise above the trauma and pain I experienced in my early years of life. I am so proud of the accomplishments my mom has made in her 28 years in the prison system. If anyone has ever had a reason to give up and not care, it would be her. But she did not give up. In fact, she has thrived. I believe in second chances for those who put in the work and earn it. I don't know of anyone that can look at my mom's story and long list of accomplishments and say that she hasn't earned the right to be given a second chance. A second chance at life as a mother and as a grandmother. My husband, my stepdaughter, and I will do everything in our power to provide a supportive environment to help my mom continue to thrive. So on behalf of my family and I ask that the board give strong consideration to giving my mom, Shanda Crain, her second chance at life.
All right, thank you. Now we'll hear from the DA's office, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just a quick brief note on this case, and I think it's been noted already. Obviously, there is an important part of this is an acceptance of responsibility as well as candor in the case. As been noted, Ms. Crain has shown neither in this case. Just as a brief history, especially as it goes to acceptance of responsibility, Ms. Crain had originally implicated her husband, I believe it's Brent Crain, who is now since deceased. Mr. Crain took a polygraph test, passed, at which point she then changed the story to it was a Landon Crain who was the person who committed the murder, till she ultimately then confessed to the murder, changed it to she participated in the murder, and has actually come now full circle to blaming now her deceased husband again for the murder in this case. I think that Ms. Crain's answers have shown that she is not willing to accept responsibility for the murder that she was convicted of, for the murder that she had ultimately admitted to before then changing her story for, in essence, the second time. And I think that this shows a lack of ability to be a part of the rehabilitative process if she cannot have candor with this board or show any type of acceptance of responsibility for the murder in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Crain, is there a statement you'd like to make before we turn it over to Ms. McCray?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I would like to begin by expressing my sincere thanks and gratitude to this honorable board for allowing me this opportunity. I realize that this opportunity is not due me and that it is a privilege. I've sat here and I've listened to people support me and speak about my accomplishment and the good I've done. As humbled as I am, I need this board and anyone who is listening to know that all the good I have done will never, ever overshadow the hurt and pain that I have caused others. My actions rob so many people of many things. Please know there's not a day that goes by that I'm not reminded of this and regret what I did. I look back at the person I was 29 years ago. I was selfish, lost, abused, individual who had no direction. I took the life of two beautiful people who would have walked on the moon for me. I had no regard for others and only thought about myself. I was a liar and a thief who only wanted the validation and love of my husband. My sole purpose in life was to please him. Fast forward 29 years later, that person no longer exists. God, the Department of Correction, self-motivation, family and friend support have helped transform that person into a woman who has direction, self-esteem, and knows her self-worth. I know the value of family, others, and myself. I've worked hard not to erase the damage that I've caused, but to become the best version of me that I can be in order not to ever cause anyone else pain and hurt. I truly hope that my parents are looking down and are proud of the woman that I have become. If I could go back and undo what I did, I would, but I can't. However, I can move forward by continuing to give of myself to others and the community. I stand before you today full of regret and remorse, requesting that you grant me clemency and a time computation. I'm asking for the opportunity to give back to my family and a society that I took from. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Ms. McCray.
Thank you. Members of the board, there is nothing that can be said to undo the egregious crime that Ms. Crain committed or erase the pain that her actions caused her family and community. It may have taken some time, but she has accepted responsibility for such egregious crime. And it's hard for a person to wrap around their heads about the gruesomeness of it. But she has taken accountability for the part she played in changing her family forever. Instead of devolving in self-pity, Ms. Crain decided to capitalize on opportunities, and that afforded her the opportunity to redeem herself. Ms. Crain is currently pursuing her bachelor's degree from Tulane University and holds a 3.9 GPA. She is a woman rooted in her faith who constantly seeks out to self-improve and positively impact others. True redemption is when guilt leads to good. For Ms. Crain, each class and program that she participated in were new chances to make a comeback. Each certificate was a new chance to get it right. She has been recognized for her commitment to rehabilitation by Mr. James LeBlanc for being one of 3 incarcerated women in the entire country to earn NCCER instructor credentials. Retired Warden Jim Rogers has expressed how much of an example Ms. Crain is and thinks she is an inmate to imitate. Retired Warden Frederick Boot praises Ms. Crain for her exemplary disciplinarian record. He says that her advocacy efforts resulted in changes that have benefited all offenders during her incarceration. Master Sergeant Champagne considers Ms. Crain to be selfless because even though she has her own struggles and traumas that she has overcome, she still gives her all to her reentry court mentees on a day-to-day basis. Other members of the staff have conveyed that Ms. Crain has shown great leadership skills amongst her peers. Ms. Crain has not only taken advantage of every opportunity offered to her over the past 28 years, but she serves her community at LCIW wearing many hats. She's a student, an instructor, and a mentor. She donates to community outreach and has completed several writing competitions that encourage other offenders to participate as well. Ms. Crain is viewed as a mother figure to many of those incarcerated here and is constantly offering solace to anyone she encounters. Walking into LCIW over these past few weeks, it is evident that the staff and other offenders alike hold Ms. Crain in high regard. She's a model offender who deserves a chance to show everyone of the rehabilitation offered behind these gates that allows a person to become the best version of themselves. Ms. Crain is an example that positive change can happen in the DOC when an offender wants to be a better person and puts forth the effort to redeem themselves. She has a low Tiger score and is no longer a threat to public safety. If granted clemency and released, Ms. Crain will have the full support of the Parole Project and her daughters. She has prepared herself for a life after release and will be a law-abiding, productive citizen. For these reasons, we respectfully ask you all to look at the efforts of the woman here today and vote in favor of granting Ms. Crain clemency by commuting her life sentence to a term of 60 years. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Yes, thank you. Ready to vote?
Yes.
Yes, we're ready to vote. Mrs. Jackson will be voting first.
Ms. Crain, I acknowledge that you've done some wonderful things and you an impact on a lot of lives. And I commend you for that. I really do commend you for that. It's something you should be proud of. But on the other hand, yeah, every case that we review usually is horrific in some respects. Yours is unique because it involved the life of your own parents. The statement that you made at the end, I appreciate that statement, but it didn't really reflect the things that you actually said during this hearing. You weren't even, you started off by saying you did not kill your parents. That's what you said in your application. That's what you said when I first asked you about what happened. And we both know that that is not true. You did, in fact, kill both of your parents. You and you alone. Nobody else was there with you except that child that you took and you removed from the home. You talk about the harm that you caused, but I don't know that you really appreciate just the magnitude of the harm that you have caused. And one of the things that I always find particularly cruel in another way is when offenders allow their family to believe they're innocent victims of the system and that they've been unjustly confined. That's a layer of cruelty that does a lot of damage. You've allowed your daughter, who spoke first, to think that you didn't do this. So that tells me you have not been honest with her. I don't think you've been honest with the board today either. And for me, honesty is crucial because it shows that you've changed. But what it shows me is that you're manipulative. You haven't changed because you haven't owned what you've done. And so for me, I not today. I cannot today in good conscience vote for your commutation or to recommend a commutation because I don't think you fully dealt with the issues that brought you here. And I don't think that your rehabilitation is complete because you still are unable to accept responsibility for your actions. So my vote today would be to deny.
Mr. Rocha.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I'd like to take personal privilege. Professor Lancaster, Ms. McCray, and her co-counsel did an excellent job today. I really enjoyed their presentations, and they did an excellent job. Ms. Crain, I like a full responsibility for your actions. Overwhelming opposition from the legal community, law enforcement, the DA's office, and I have to say it again, a lack of responsibility, as far as I'm concerned, is to show that you have not rehabilitated yourself. So I agree with Ms. Jackson, and my vote is to deny your request.
Mr. Freeman.
Ms. Crain, one thing is I think you're finally starting to admit to guilt, but now you need to learn to deal with it. I just don't think you're ready yet. I also vote to deny.
All right, Ms. Crain, so you've received 3 votes to deny your application for clemency this morning. I do agree with my colleagues. I think you're on the cusp. It's just not today. My vote today also is to deny. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.